What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Action Network podcast presented by FanDuel. I am your host, Chris Raybon, and this is your conference championship weekend betting preview, where we will talk about our favorite totals, teasers, underdogs, and crack open our weekly Sunday six-pack of bets with the help of my co-host, the Prime Minister of Degenerate Nation, Stuck. What is going on?
What's going on, brother? I think I had a terrible weekend. Everything I said was wrong, pretty much. Even my my ETN prop that I gave out on here, like I lost a ton of money on that prop because I was able to get down on like 18.5 for most of my bets. I know it gave it out, like if you saw it on the app, it was 17.5 when we recorded. And it landed on 18. It was funny because then you had a Barkley prop, and like the two first-round draft pick running backs just don't play in the fourth quarter. I mean, I guess Barkley got hurt and like the game was over, but I don't know why ETN was not playing for most of that game. And then I had the Bills, and I played the Snover. I got my first Snover of the year, which did help the Bengals in their offensive line because you can't get a pass rush when it's in those conditions, and we'll talk about that later. But man, the Bengals defense, the probably the most shocking result of the year for me is the Bills only scoring 10 points in that game and looking just lost. And then I also had the Cowboys, which I mean, I guess I'd probably bet again at 4. Could have went either way. A couple drop pick here, turnover here, but it was a pretty even statistical game, but didn't get to the window. And luckily I salvaged the weekend. I followed a couple
Oh,
props that you and Kerner had, so shout out to you guys. So
Dak rushing over.
Dak rushing over, Perine, the Perine prop too. So hit a couple there, and but it's shout to I owe apology to Bengals fans. They dominated that game, and it was so much more depressing because like we were so close to winning. The Ravens talking about, like, and mainly when I say we on this show, it's because I was my only Super Bowl future from before the year, like so close to beating the Bengals. And then you see that Bills no show, and it's like, what if Lamar was healthy for that game? And like, what if? And then you see Mahomes potentially be hurt, which we'll talk about. And it's like, man, like that's why in the NFL playoffs, just get in, and it's one game, like things can happen, like the fumble. Great performances all around and a bunch of unders after a bunch of overs. And but we're on to conference championship weekend. It's been hell of a season, so let's close it out strong.
Yeah, let's do it. And we'll obviously dive into both of these games in detail. As a quick reminder, a subscription to Action Pro is how you get the most out of Action's award-winning app. And right now, Action is offering a pro subscription at 40% off. This is only being offered during the NFL playoffs. So if you don't already have Pro, now is the best time to subscribe and unlock all of the best features of the Action app. And to those wondering about this podcast over the next couple of weeks, we have tons of episodes featuring myself, Stuck, Brandon Anderson, the whole Action Network podcast team, starting Monday, going all the way through the Super Bowl Sunday. So don't worry about that. We'll have you covered even more so than during the regular and normal season. All right, so let's jump right into our conference championship Sunday six-pack. And as a reminder for everyone listening, for the postseason, we open it up, the six-pack, to any type of bet, as long as it's reasonably even juice on either side. Props, first half, whatever you want. So, but we'll still break down the games as well, even though we only have one pick, I think, in terms of a spread or total, but we'll obviously break down which way we're leaning for the sides, for the totals of these two games in depth as we kind of go through our picks. But and it's so we're giving you credit for that ETN pick, because you gave it out at 17.5 on here, and you did finish with 18. Unfortunately, that was your 1-pointer, so it's still 80 to 56. I only hit one too, but it happened to be a 2-pointer. But you're up first.
Blowout city. All right, let's talk. I'm gonna give out 6 props today, and like there's like I'm gonna give out 3 in my 6-pack, and then there's like 3 that I'll give out on the side that are like correlated.
Baby.
Like correlated with them. So if you want to dive in, welcome
Oh
to
yeah.
dive in fully with me. But let's start with I guess we'll start with yeah. I mean, I guess you have all of your plays are in the Philly San
Yep,
Francisco
yep.
game. So
It might be because I'm writing it up and you're writing up the other game. I don't know if
yeah.
that worked out that way, but I just feel a lot more locked into this game. So I'm hoping to kind of hear what you got to
All
say
right.
about the
Let's
AFC.
start. We'll start there to get all of your stuff out of the way because I do have a play in this game. The Eagles are 2.5 point favorites here,
Yep.
and the biggest key is to me is what is Brock Purdy, and you're going to speak to this. Can he play clean? And he's been great. And if you look at his numbers, like he's had some drop picks here and there, but he's been really good over the intermediate part of the field, which is like 10 to 20 yards. He's excelling there, which a lot of times rookies don't. For what it's worth, he's only the 5th rookie quarterback to ever start a conference championship game. The previous 4 went 0-4 straight up, with 4 passing touchdowns, 9 interceptions. That's Mark Sanchez, Joe Flacco, Ben Roethlisberger, and Sean King. Shout out to Sean.
Throwback.
And from the Tulane Green Wave. Purdy's won his first 7 starts straight up, which was a San Francisco record. And no rookie starting quarterbacks ever made the Super Bowl, let alone won it. So we will see. And he's only the 2nd quarterback since the merger to win his first 7 career starts. So Purdy is going for some more magic here. I make this spread like right on. I actually make it Philly -3 just for the rookie quarterback on the road, the travel. But I mean, like, it's nothing worth playing to me. I do think it's going to be a lower scoring game, which you're going to get to. And I'm going to start with my first pick of the Sunday 6-pack for the conference championship weekend. I'm going to go with Jalen Hurts under 49.5 rushing yards. I think that this number is super inflated. Now, if you look, the first 2 games of the season, he went wild running. Since then, I think 9 of 13 games, he's gone under this number. Still 9 of 15 for the season. And here's a couple things. He's going up against an elite rush defense that's going to have, I think, a really good prep here for them. And he's also going up against a team that's a snail, right? That they're slow. So there's not as many plays. And I just think that, if you go back to the running quarterbacks that San Francisco has faced all year, no one's really gashed them. I mean, even Fields in the opener had 11 carries for 28 yards. So I think that their linebackers here and their defensive ends can do a good job at containing Fields. It's a lot of the speed at linebacker is really going to limit some of those explosive runs that I would worry about with a prop this high. So I think this is way too high. I think that San Francisco's defense is going to be built here to make sure that Hurts doesn't beat him with his legs. I think they're going to have a really good game plan, and they have the personnel to slow him down. I think this is an inflated number. And then on the side, because which will lead into, I think, your first pick, I also like, and this, I'm curious to get your thoughts on this since you're previewing this game on actionnetwork.com and the Action Network app. I went with McCaffrey under 61.5 yards. Now, when I try to preview conference championship games and the Super Bowl for that matter, when we get to the Super Bowl, I try to think of, the lines are really efficient, and you guys are the masters of the prop projections. But I try to think of okay, how is each team going to approach this game and change things up, right? Like that's really what you want to do in a game with this much meaning. You want to, all right, I'm going to come out with a surprise, or I want to make sure that this aspect of this team doesn't beat me. And I think so on one aspect, I think that the 49ers are going to say, Hurts is not going to beat us with his legs, and they're going to make sure that doesn't happen. And already they're a great run defense. And then on the other side, I think that the Eagles their main focus coming into this game is, and I think you're going to see a scheme shift, some different play calls, and they're going to say McCaffrey and the running game not going to beat us. So I don't know if that's a different, more guys in the box, because I think they're going to say rookie quarterback on the road. Their run D has been their weakness, but when Jordan Davis has been in there, it's been better. But they're going to say rookie quarterback on the road, you beat us. And I think that they're going to focus on slowing down the run. And again, San Fran's slow team, doesn't run a lot of plays. They have a lot of backs. You also have McCaffrey with that calf injury. I think he's going to be fine, but who knows if it flares up or he doesn't get the same amount of workload. They're also an underdog in this game. So game script wise, Maybe they're not running it as much and, running it when they're up as they've been for 10 or 11 straight games. I think 12 that they've won. So I think this number is a little inflated. Now, it's scary in that he could break a long one at any point in time, but I still think it's a little inflated. So official pick, Hurts under 49.5 rushing yards. And then side pick, McCaffrey under 61.5. What are your thoughts there, and where are you going for your first pick?
Yeah, so when it comes to Hurts, I talk about this in my preview. I think there's a lot of uncertainty as to exactly where we are with this Eagles offense, and that includes Hurts, his rushing ability and his passing ability. And so, in terms of his rushing, it's like, okay, he came back a couple weeks ago in that game against the Giants, to clinch the 1 seed. He had 9 carries. I think 17 yards or something like that. They had some kneel downs mixed in. Obviously, was not trying to take contact. And then last week, the Eagles blow out the Giants, and everyone's okay. The offense is back to normal. Everything's fine. But 2 of the 3 facets that make the Eagles offense great were not anything to write home about in that Giants game, and that was the passing efficiency and Hurts' rushing efficiency. Hurts ran last week 9 times again, 7 design runs this time, but he still ran for only 34 yards. And
that's a terrible run day.
Right. And for the season, he was right around 50 yards per game on average. And so you're still looking at a player who, okay, the volume went back up, but where are we with the efficiency? Is another week, between games going to help? That's a question mark. And then passing wise, he's faced the Giants 3 times in the last 4 weeks, in the last 4 games. He's also faced the week before that, he faced the Titans. They were bottom 5 pass defense. In between the Giants, he faced the Bears, literally the worst defense in the league, pass run overall. So he's faced 5 really bad defenses in a row. And before that, Packers, who have a bottom 5 run defense. And yet over the second half of the season, his passing efficiency has been down as well, even going against the soft schedules. And last week, it was 6.4 yards an attempt, and that's with Goddard back. That's with Lane Johnson back. So I don't know where we are with Hurts, how truly healthy he is. And, I mean, this Niner defense, as you kind of mentioned, it's a major step up in class just from the defenses Hurts has been facing. I really wish we had got to see him against that Dallas defense, that Minshew starting, and against that Saint defense, because I think it would have gave us more of kind of a context and a perspective on, just where he is. But obviously he wasn't healthy, so that's moot. But I tend to kind of lean that this Eagles offense is not the offense we saw over the first 8 games of the year. I think they were playing best, like a elite unit. Now they're still playing like a above average, to good unit over the second half of the year with Hurts. But I think there was always going to be some regression once defenses saw AJ Brown tape and kind of figured out, how to defend this offense a little better. So I think Hurts' running will be key here. I actually have him projected for 10.7 carries, but I do have him just under 50 yards for a median, about 47.5. So I am showing value on your under as well, but that's,
and maybe get a couple kneels.
Numbers.
Maybe get a couple kneels.
Yeah, and I do factor that in. So the Eagles actually have a probably lower than usual kneel down projection.
Yeah.
Just because they're only favored by 2.5 and they've been blowing teams out. But I factor that in. That's my question. It's like, what Jalen Hurts and what Eagles offense are we getting? Because I think as far as the handicap for the game, and I'll get into my pick in a second, but as far as the handicap for the side, I think if we knew that this Eagles offense was going to be the best version of itself, the version that we saw over the first 8 games where Hurts was averaging 8.5 yards per attempt versus the second half of the year where he was averaging 7.5 with, double the interception rate, then I think we could say, okay, if that's the offense we're going to get, and we're going to get Hurts, who the last 2 weeks, he ran 18 times for 47 yards. If we're going to get the Hurts over the first 14 games, it's averaging, 50 yards a game and is much more efficient, then I'd say, okay, Eagles are the play here, inside a key number. But we don't know that. And at the same time, we also don't know just is it going to get a little better because he's a week removed from the injury? So we don't know that either. So that's why I don't really have a play on the side. I just think there's too much uncertainty, and we're talking about a small spread where we're inside key numbers already. It would be different if maybe the Niners were getting plus 3.5. I would say, okay, just go with the Niners just because of the uncertainty with the Eagles offense, but 2.5, it's not quite the same. So that's why I don't have a play on the side, but I do agree. I think there's some uncertainty with Hurts, and I do think that this Niner D represents a big step up in class.
Especially compared to the whole schedule too. Not only just recently, the whole schedule of like who they faced for opposing defenses. They also were overall better against the pass than the run. Now overall, they just weren't good. But I also think I have a lot of respect for both staffs here. So I think that the Eagles are going to try to focus on slowing down the 49ers rushing attack. And then I also think that the Eagles might come out here and throw it a little, because if you're going to attack the San Francisco defense, you want to do it through the air. So I think that they're going to come out and they might be a little more aggressive through the air than trying to run it. And then, as you mentioned, there is the health concern. And then you now have tape on like what the Eagles were doing early in the year and how they were using Hurts and to run. So like you have a very advanced, these are the NFC Championship. You have a very advanced scouts for this. And then you're also talking about a run defense that's elite. So and then any thoughts on McCaffrey under?
Yeah, I have him right under 60. It's really just kind of he hasn't been getting that monster workload that we saw with Elijah Mitchell out. It's kind of been McCaffrey getting 2/3, Mitchell getting 1/3. And last week, Mitchell actually got more carries, and that was because McCaffrey was banged up in the fourth quarter. So, but even the game before, McCaffrey 52% of the non-quarterback design runs, and Mitchell 31%, and then Mason had 7% at the end of the game. So it's not like McCaffrey's been running away here with the rushing workload. So I think that's what you're kind of focused on. I do wonder with the Eagles, because the Cowboys, they kind of stacked the box, and that was the first team to really do that. But the Eagles, their whole philosophy is limit explosives. So I do wonder, because Purdy has been so explosive and this offense has been so explosive with him, if they continue to just kind of sit back and say, hey, okay, run the ball. But I also think, they could play some more man coverage and then get a defender in the box that way, because if you don't play man coverage, you're kind of wasting Slay and Bradbury on the outside, because we know what the Niners are going to do. They're going to run in breakers and crossers and, all these plays over the middle of the field. And, you're going to kind of get away from Slay and Bradbury's coverage doing that, even with your perimeter receivers. So I do think you could see more man, which then would allow the Eagles to kind of get up and defend the run a little bit better.
Yeah, that's what I'm banking on. I'm banking on more man, and then more exotic fronts, more guys in the box. And then, they could end up saying, look, the kid's on early. But I think that's going to be their initial game plan. Like, they can always say, all right, let's go back and sit back into what we do. But I think that their game plan coming in here is stop the run, make the rookie on the road beat us through the air. And knowing that that's probably where San Fran wants to start to attack to get into the game. So, I think the Eagles' initial focus is going to be on slowing McCaffrey down. But where are you going for your first pick?
So for my first pick and the second overall of the conference championship Sunday 6-pack, I'm going with Eagles Niners under 46.5. And I like this for a variety of factors based on the matchups on each side. We already started talking about the Eagles, how healthy is Hurts, and just looking at, again, the passing efficiency down the stretch for Hurts. First 8 games, 68% completions, 8.5 yards an attempt, and an interception rate of 0.7%. And then his last 8 games, 65% completion, so down about a little over 3 points there, 7.4 yards an attempt, so down over a yard per attempt over his first 8 games. And again, this is against a bunch of literally bottom 3 defenses in the league. So against a very easy schedule, he still fell off, which tells me, and he didn't really play when he was super hurt. He only had, I guess that one Giants game, and you could say that the second Giants game in the playoffs where he was hurt. So, and like the end of the Bears game. So it's not like he played all that hurt, and it was trending down before that anyway. So I do think defenses, started to figure it out a little bit over the second half. And we always know Jalen Hurts wasn't like Patrick Mahomes, going to average 8.5 yards per attempt for the year. But you also look at this Niner defense, and this is just the fourth time that Jalen Hurts will face a top 10 defense in DVOA this year. It's Niner defense is number one. And against those teams, and it's only been 3 games, so still a small sample, but we have to kind of look at it to get an idea and further gauge where this offense is at. Because again, it's tough. And
yeah, especially since they're scheduled. These 2 teams had the second and first easiest schedules in the NFL.
So it's really like, even though we don't have a sample size on Purdy more than, it's only like 7 games, it feels like it's just as hard to gauge this Eagle offense based on how the trends just kind of split down the middle with Hurts. But you look at Hurts against non-top 10 defenses, 31 points per game, 411 yards total yards per game, 6 yards per play. And then you look at Hurts in the 3 games where he faced top 10 defenses, 24 points a game, just under 24 points a game, just under 311 total yards per game, and 5.1 yards per play. So dropped off about 7 points, 100 yards, and a yard per play, about a full yard per play. So that tells me that, and this is the best defenses they faced, this Niners defense. So there could be, a big drop off compared to what we're usually used to against the Eagles, similar to how we saw Dallas, just stomp over Tampa Bay one week, and then they score 12 points the next week. So I think that's why I like it in terms of the Eagles, keeping their score down. And then on the other side, you have the 49ers, and they hadn't really faced a defense that was very good at all until this Cowboys defense last week. And, they go from 35 points per game, 404 total yards in Purdy's first 6 starts, to 19 points and 312 total yards. So they drop off 16 points and almost 100 yards total in that for them. So both of these teams
at home in nice conditions.
Yeah. So both of these, and now not to mention the Niners playing their first game in the cold in quite a while. Going as far east as they've been all year, I believe. So
rookie quarterback on the road, and this kind of environment, you might be a little more, let's rely on our D, a little more conservative early too.
So that's why I do expect Shanahan to have another run heavy game plan. As usual, they've been averaging 31 design runs and just over 29 design passes in Purdy starts. So, I don't expect this game to get out of hand. Obviously, that could always change the splits, but I expect them to kind of stay run heavy so it doesn't get out of hand. And Shanahan's conservative and all that. But both of these teams, again, bottom line, massive drop-offs when facing top-level defenses. And then to top it all off, and this is for shout to Chad Millman. We got some referee trends here. John Hussey's going to ref this game. Let him play, referee. Like, he is the quintessential, just let these guys play. So he calls less penalties on the offense, but he also calls less penalties on the defense. And that is what tends to make games stay under the total. So he's about 2 full penalties below league average, calling about 9, just over 9 penalties a game. The league average is 11, just over 11. And 51% fewer defensive holding calls than the league average. 16% fewer pass interference calls than the league average. And get this, he's called 1 roughing the passer all year. The league average is about 1 every 3 games, about 0.33 per game. He's called 1 all year. So this guy, he's not gonna give you cheap yards on DPIs. He's not gonna give you the cheap 15 when you just touch the quarterback on the head or anything like that. At least he hasn't up until this point. So you look at his games, and when he refs a game outdoor, I like to filter for outdoor, indoor, because I think indoors is just such a different environment in terms of scoring. But outdoor games that Hussey has refereed, 56, 39, and 1 to the under, 59%, including the postseason. And this year, 8 and 3 to the under outdoor for Hussey. So give me the Niner Eagle under 46.5. Still like it at 46. It might get up to 47 because the majority of bets and money are coming in on the over here. But I see this as like a 2017 type of game, maybe a 23-20. But you get some kind of insurance if it goes 20-20 and there's a overtime, touchdown 26-20, you'd still push at 46. But I really have trouble seeing it get higher than that. And I think you could get one. It's more likely that one or both of these defenses pulls a Bengals and just completely shuts down the other team than the opposite, which is, one of these offenses completely explodes, in my opinion. So yeah, give me the under 46.5.
Well, do you want to? Yeah, I would agree. I think this has like 20-17 written all over it. Do you want to just give your second and third picks? We can, since we're on this game, and we can finish out this game.
Yeah, sure. All right. So for my second, I'm gonna go with Quez Watkins under 16.5 receiving yards. And so this one, I know a lot of people are saying, okay, the Niners have been weak deep down the field. Watkins can stretch the field.
But a lot of people are going back to last year. He had a 93-yard,
a 91 yarder
reception.
I know. But first of all,
it's a good storyline. Watkins is gonna have a 90-yarder again,
and that's why I think that his line is a little too high. It's a little inflated here because there's two things working against him in this game. First of all, this Eagle team, I think they do have to run the ball, and I think they have to figure out how to run the ball. And I think part of that is going to be, getting a guy like Zach Pascal, who's a better blocker on the field at times. And they did that last week. Quez Watkins snap counts, he got outsnapped by Pascal last week. And for 4 weeks in a row, Watkins snap counts have been decreasing. So, 4 weeks ago, it was 72%, then 51%, then 42%. Then in the first playoff game, 31%. And that's with A.J. Brown a little bit gimpy in that game. For the first time all year, Pascal ran more routes last week than Watkins. So that could go back to normal. I'm actually projecting it to go back to the normal season averages, and I'm still projecting him under. And the second reason being, he's been a completely different player with and without Dallas Goedert on the field. Because remember, you got Brown, you got Devontae Smith. The running backs are, they're always going to be, they're playmakers. Like, you like your backs. So Watkins is essentially always going to be the fifth read. Unless Goddard's out, he might jump up to the fourth read because you have Jack Stoll at tight end or Calcaterra or whoever. So when he's the fifth read, which is essentially the games Goddard has played, his median receiving yardage in a game is 0 yards. He's had more games with a straight up goose egg than he's had with positive yardage receiving with Goddard active. And in the 5 games Goddard missed, that's when Watkins pretty much did all his damage this season. Yeah, so without Goddard, Quez Watkins, 4.8 targets per game, 3.6 receptions, 26 receiving yards per game. With Goddard, 1.9 targets, 1.2 receptions, and 16 receiving yards. But again, that 16 is overstating it. It's just a couple of big games, which you're going to get with Watkins, of long receptions. But the median is 0, 14 or fewer, 62% of the time. So I think this line is way too high. I have his median projected around 12. So I'd bet this down to 13.5. His target per route rate without Goddard in the lineup, 19%. With Goddard in the lineup, 8.8%. He's being targeted fewer than 1 every 10 routes with Goddard in. And we saw them decrease his snaps. And one of the Eagles beat reporters for The Athletic, made a good point. They said, that could have been a product of, okay, we just want to get a more physical guy in against the Giants. Well, you would do that against the Niners as well, but also it could have just been a product of self-scouting over the 2-week bye, with Watkins not really productive as a receiver and not really giving you much in the run game. So, with his snap counts decreasing 4 straight weeks, I think there's a good chance that continues. But even if it doesn't and he goes back to his season averages, I still have this projected to go under. So Quez under 16.5. That's my second pick.
And you wouldn't, if someone's worried about just like one long reception against a 49ers team that's, I think they've given up at least a 25-yard reception in like 8 or 9 straight games. You wouldn't also mind like the under receptions, right? It's probably
I wouldn't.
1.5.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind that either. I think generally speaking, you tend to get more cheapness with receptions. Like you
could also have a pitch.
Yeah, just a wide receiver screen. Just one of those screen.
Something like 1 yard.
Yeah, like I still feel like I'm showing more value on the yardage, which is why I'm going with the yardage. And generally that's the case. There are there's certain times when it's different, but generally speaking, the yardage is where the value is going to be because this there's a good chance he goose eggs again. I mean, he goose egged last week, had the underform last week. He goose egged, and it just in a game against it's still a tough defense. Everyone's like, okay, well, San Francisco, they're vulnerable deep. They're vulnerable to like the tertiary receivers and things like that. But last week, CeeDee Lamb was the only guy to go off against them. Everyone else didn't do jack squat against them for that Dallas team. I think Michael Gallup might have been held without a catch, and Brown got like a couple. But all three Dallas receivers not named CeeDee Lamb, the 2, 3, and 4 for Dallas, all were at least 10 yards under their season average last week against San Francisco. So it's still a tough defense. Not one I foresee Watkins.
And we both like the under against. Overall.
Right.
So like,
yeah,
it lends itself to the under. So, and then what's your third pick?
So for my third pick of the conference championship Sunday 6-pack, I'm going with Brock Purdy under a half an interception. And this is more of a numbers play, but there is a reason why I like this, even though I do like the under. And that's because of the way I expect San Francisco to play. I expect them to be run heavy yet again. And yes, Philadelphia's been great, that they finished this regular season top 5 in interception rate. But even after adjusting for that, I'm showing value on this number down to about plus 112. It's plus 122 right now at FanDuel, the official sponsor of the Action Network Pod. But, Purdy, he has a interception rate of 1.75%. And because his attempts are down, the league average for attempts is around 34. So when you're looking for a guy to not throw an interception, the first thing you're looking at is keep the attempts down. He's only had 35 attempts one time. Every other time he has been, in the high 20s or just clearing 30. So, that's one factor. And then he's been trending up in terms of his decision-making over his last 3 games. PFF tracks turnover-worthy throws. Over his last 3 games, 79 attempts, 0. Now, I know people are going to say, well, he had a dropped interception. Yeah, but that was tipped by Ayuk. There are certain interceptions that are going to be unavoidable, which is why, there's a lot of regression involved with projecting interceptions. Hail Marys, end of half, end of game. You're going to get picked on those a good amount of the time. And tip balls, you're going to get picked on those. But Purdy has been avoiding the picks that he can avoid, and it's been trending up over the last 3 games. And I know a lot of people are also going to say, well, what about the Eagles' pressure? Well, Purdy got pressured on 48.5% of his dropbacks last week against Dallas. So, yeah, and he didn't throw a pick. And 3 of his 4 picks and 5 of his 7 turnover-worthy plays this year have come from a clean pocket. So Purdy's decision-making under pressure has actually been pretty spot on. And so the Eagles, projecting because we're projecting a bump in pressure rate when facing the Eagles, it's not really bumping up his interception projection as much as it would for your average quarterback. And that's just a kind of also a credit to Kyle Shanahan's scheme because, the 49ers have also had like the most open window throws, the highest expected completion rate in this postseason just because of the scheme. And so you're getting a lot of, receivers running open and you're not really putting Purdy in that position. So, you mix the low attempts with the fact that he hasn't even committed a turnover-worthy play in the last 3. Yes, he had an interception drop. That's what everyone's going to remember. But again, that was on Ayuk. That's going to happen if it happens, you just tip your cap and say, that it is what it is. But overall, I do think the market is overrating this, kind of, oh, okay, this guy's a rookie. He's going on the road, this and that. Well, yeah, Kyle Shanahan knows that too. And I don't even know if we've seen the most run-heavy Kyle Shanahan game plan that we could see. Because in the first game against Seattle, Purdy threw 30 times for 332 yards. And then last week against Dallas, he throws 29 times for 214. But we've seen, with Jimmy G, we've seen attempts in the low 20s. We've seen attempts in the teens with Jimmy G. So, against this Eagles team, especially after getting pressured so much last week, I wouldn't be surprised if we get our most run-heavy game plan, that we've seen out of Purdy in this postseason. So I think the market's just overrating this this Purdy interception prop. Just a widow. I expect there just to be a lot of kind of long drives, run the ball, and that's how you're going to hit the under. I'm not expecting like, okay, we get in the red zone, turn it over, this and that. Both of these quarterbacks, Hurts as well, good at protecting the football. So I'm more banking on long drives, but just the quality of defense, stopping them in the red zone, getting off the field a time or two on third down, things like that. Not necessarily banking on turnovers and things like that. And I really do think Shanahan, after you get pressured on half your dropbacks, is going to kind of, find a way for that not to be an issue as much as he can, at least this week.
All right, fair enough. Let's move on to the AFC Championship game between the Bengals and Chiefs, who will meet for a spot in the Super Bowl for a second straight season. If this sounds familiar, it should, because these two teams met 3 times in 2022. So this will be the 4th meeting in the past 13 months. The Bengals won and covered in all 3, all by 3 points. And the big storyline in this game is the Mahomes ankle, which is why this line has been all over the place. And I think that it flipped again today. It got up to Bengals -2.5 from the Chiefs being a favorite. Now it's flipped back to the Chiefs being a favorite. There was some sharp groups that came in today at 2.5. Mahomes was seen not limping in the locker room, but still there's a lot of uncertainty there with how healthy he'll be. If you want to go to the trend route, you're not going to be able to decide who to bet in this game. If Mahomes is an underdog here, he's 7-1-1 against the spread when closing as an underdog. Although the one loss was the only other time if he does close an underdog here, he's only ever closed as an underdog once before, and that was earlier this season when he lost to the Bills. He's 17-6-1 against the spread as either an underdog or favorite of 3 or less. So if you want to back Mahomes because of those trends, well, that means you got to fade Joe Burrow, who's 20-5 against the spread over his past 25 starts, including a 16-1 against the spread streak against non-division opponents. He's also 19-7 against the spread away from home in his career. And perhaps most impressive of all, he's 15-2 straight up in his past 17 games against opponents with winning records. They've also gone 22 straight games without losing by more than a field goal when Jamar Chase starts. My favorite stat is Joe Burrow's 21-2 against the spread in his past 23 starts against teams that aren't or have never been the Cleveland Browns. So, these two quarterbacks, they're elite. And let's throw out the trends and decide what's going to happen in this game and who's going to cover. So let's just start first with what happened in the other 3 meetings in 2022. Bengals won 27-24, 27-24, and 34-31. All 3 games hit at least 51 points. And the Chiefs held a lead in the second half in all 3. So in those 3 previous meetings, the Chiefs only scored 20 points after halftime. The Bengals outscored them 26-6 in the fourth quarter and overtime in those 3 contests. 6 points in the fourth quarter and overtime total in 3 games. There's a reason why. Burrow is 33-14-1 against the spread in the second half in his career. It's over 70%. He's 14-4 this year and an insane 29-8-1 against the spread in the second half over the past 2 seasons. 78.5%. Why is that? Well, number one, Burrow is elite and he has elite receivers and he is clutch as hell. But also, their defensive coordinator has proven to be one of the best adjusters in all of the NFL, especially against the top quarterbacks in the league. I went in last week and I said, look, the Bengals have benefited from a pretty easy schedule of opposing quarterbacks, but you cannot deny what they've done when they've gone up against the best quarterbacks. And look no further than last week when they shut down the Bills in Buffalo. So from an against the spread perspective, I do show a little bit of value on the Chiefs, but I'm guessing at how healthy I think Mahomes is going to be. I make the spread about Chiefs -3.5. Mahomes is fully healthy. Without Mahomes, I make it Chiefs +3.5. So right now we're somewhere in the middle. I actually think Mahomes is going to be okay from what I've seen and heard. But again, I don't know anything. We're all guessing. For what it's worth, he did sprain an ankle in the opener in 2019 and high ankle sprain, got through it. The next week he played and threw for 450 yards and 4 touchdowns against the Raiders. Andy Reid came out and said he's healthier than he was then. Mahomes said the same thing. But again, it's playoff week. How much stock can you put into what these players are saying? in the press conference. But I, for one, think that he's going to be fine. I don't think he's going to run as much. I think they're going to have to change the playbook a lot and what they do. But I think it's going to be a lot of quick passing, and he's still going to have success throwing the ball as he normally does. And so that'll bring, I guess I'll go into my first pick here. And I also, because I think Mahomes is going to be healthier than I think the market is implying, I think that there's value on the over, and I think that there's some value in the Chiefs, but it's a guessing game. I'm not betting it. I'm going to bet that in props in a way. So, like, for example, I do like Mahomes over passing yards. It's not going to be one of my official picks, but I think I played a bunch of bets in the 270s today because I think he's going to be healthy. I also think that you can rely on the Bengals run D, which has been very good when Reader's in there. And then Mahomes I don't think he's going to be running a lot. That takes another avenue away of yards. And then instead of betting the Chiefs in the over, which I lean, Mahomes passing yards is kind of a hedge that works in either scenario. So if he's healthy, you're getting this at a discount. And I think he'll clear 300 yards. If he's not healthy, and I don't think obviously there's risk that he comes out of the game, like he gets too hurt, but whatever, there's risk that happens with Burrow too, like happens with anybody. Obviously it's a little higher for Mahomes, but they're going to have to like lock him in jail to get him out of the game. But if he's not healthy and, it's a detriment to the team, they're going to be playing from behind. And then you're in this behind state and he's going to be throwing even more. And where I think it could hurt him the most and why I'm going to stay away from the total on the side is it is his plant foot. And Mahomes, if there is one, he's the best quarterback in the NFL. Could go down as the best ever. If there is, one slight on him, it's that at times, and it's also what makes him great, he'll have an erratic throw, right? And it'll be a turnover. And in the red zone, he's just trying to make plays, which is what he does. Now, with this injury being on his plant foot, if there's anyone that can make the throws still, it's him, which he's shown before, but the mechanics might not be as smooth and he might have a couple more erratic throws, which then could lead to turnovers. And then that increases the variance in the game. And maybe they drive down the field and he throws two, red zone turnovers in this game. Then you wouldn't want to be sitting with the Chiefs in an over ticket, but the yards will be there. So I think no matter what the state is, I think Mahomes is going to get his passing yards in this game. I think it's just going to be a lot more quick passes. And then I think in a way it's going to work in the favor of the Chiefs because they're going to have to come with they're going to design a lot of new things for Mahomes and what they've been doing. And a lot of it's been reliant on Mahomes' mobility, but you kind of have this new factor. So I think Mahomes is going to be fine. But again, let me get into my second pick of the conference championship Sunday six-pack. Let's go with the one I think you're going to disagree with. I'm going to go with Joe Burrow over, 17 and a half rushing yards. For reference, Burrow ran it 9 times for 48 yards, 46 after 2 kneel downs against the Chiefs earlier this season. He also had 6 attempts for 31 yards last week in Buffalo. Now, the biggest question for me is you got to remember last week, it's still the Bengals offensive line. Going into that game, once that conditions happen, there's a reason I bet the over. You can't get a pass rush in those conditions, and it really helped the Bengals offensive line. This week, it might not be as easy for this Bengals offensive line with the injuries that they're dealing with, which I think is going to force Burrow out of the pocket more often. And look, it's a huge game. Everything's on the line. I think these elite quarterbacks are more willing to run. Now, obviously, Mahomes can't do it with an injury, but I think Burrow is going to be really willing to run here when he needs to do it. And against the Chiefs scheme, it really invites quarterbacks to do it and have success when you can. The Chiefs have allowed since the bye week, they played a bunch of statues before their bye. Since the bye week, they allowed the second most rushing yards to opposing quarterbacks. Here are the following outputs that they allowed over 11 games, excluding kneels. Malik Willis, 7 for 41. Trevor Lawrence, 4 for 26. Herbert, 5 for 17. Bryce Perkins, 8 for 45. Burrow, 9 for 48. Russell Wilson, 4 for 57. Davis Mills, 3 for 23. Geno Smith, 3 for 16. Russell Wilson, 4 for 27. Jarrett Stidham, 7 for 50. Trevor Lawrence, 3 for 26. Over those 11 games, opposing quarterbacks averaged 5.2 carries for 34.5 yards per game. They eclipsed 22 yards. Now, we just got to get to 18. They eclipsed 22 yards in 9 of those 11 contests. So I think the matchup and then the offensive line issues and then Burrow's increased willingness to run here and the fact that I think Mahomes is going to be okay. So that means the Chiefs are scoring, and then the Bengals are keeping up. So there's going to be more offensive plays than like if it's just Mahomes sucks and the Bengals blow this open. Probably not good for Burrow running props. So that plays into it as well. So yeah, I'll stop and pause there to get your thoughts. Official pick: Burrow over rushing yards. I also like the Mahomes over passing yards. I think there is some correlation there. So you have any thoughts on either of those props?
Yeah, I actually like this. I have them at 19, and I was actually, it's funny you mentioned this because I was actually mentioning to Kerno last week. I was like, hey, the market's at like 10.5 for Burrow, and I'm at like 16.5. But I don't know if I'm crazy or I'm just, his median was still 10 or something like that. So I ended up not betting it. But he's actually been going up in my model in rushing because he scrambled a lot more, after the bye. So leading into the bye, he's averaging 1.4 scrambles per game. And then since the bye, and including the playoffs, he's up to 2.1. Over his last 8 games, 2.3 scrambles per game. So
which is probably correlated with two things, with like more meaningful games and then offensive line injuries.
Yeah, exactly. So, you look at, that, and scramble rate, by the way, is very sticky quickly, which means that you could kind of throw out some of the older data as you get new data. Like I only add about 64 dropbacks of regression of league average, which is about 2 games worth. If you about 30, 35 dropbacks a game or so. So a little less than 2 games worth for Burrow, who's dropping back like 40 times a game. So yeah, so when I see something like that, I adjust quickly. So for this season, Burrow's scramble rate is about 4.2%, but it's about 5.4% over his last 8 games. And, just that increase of a percent or so, just over 1%, that does bump him up over the market. So I actually do agree with this one. And, it's kind of been a talking point. I mean, all these quarterbacks, we heard it with Dak. We heard it with Burrow. Mahomes, if he wasn't injured, we see that every year. Mahomes rushing production increases when you get to the postseason.
Josh Allen usually does too. Yeah.
It's just these quarterbacks take pride in, calling their own number when it matters most. And so against the Chiefs, and the Chiefs do play a decent bit of man coverage as well, which leads,
you're not like, you're not going to have guys sitting there. There's going to be lanes where guys have your backs to you and you can pick up a lot of yards there. And then the other question I think a lot of people are going to ask, I wrestle with this and I ultimately decided to pass. Maybe I'll change my mind. But Mahomes' rushing yards, what scared me off is because I kind of lean the Chiefs a little bit, like barely. So, and then like he takes knees that are like, you could lose like 18 yards with his knees. So like 11.5, because I'm like, all right, even if he's hurt and hobbled, like Mahomes, and because the Bengals know this, like you're not going to, if he is hobbled, then you like won't be worried about him running. And then like on a third down, even if they told him not to, you're not going to stop Mahomes from scrambling up the middle. Like, even if he just scrambles and gets down, like I could see him doing that a couple times, even if he's hobbled, getting to like 15, 16 yards. Then I was worried about the kneels. And so there's too much uncertainty, but I saw 11.5 and I was like, but then again, I was like, maybe he was never runs at all because he's too scared. But a close game in the second half and a third down, he could scramble up the middle. He's going.
So here's how so full disclosure, I do have Mahomes at 8. So I do show value in the under, but it's a guess. This is more of a guess than anything with the projection. So I actually break my quarterback projections into 3 facets: kneel downs, designed runs that are not kneel downs, which are usually quarterback sneaks or read options for some of the more
which he's gonna have none of. He's gonna have no sneaks.
Yeah, so
no
design runs. None of those. He only averages 0.3 for the year because remember he busted his kneecap. So they don't really design runs for this dude. Yeah, so he's at 0.3 for the year. I have him at 0. Okay, fine. Kneel downs, I have him projected.
Do you have him for the highest yards for kneel downs, or do you do the same yardage for kneel downs?
I actually don't. Yeah, I kind of because it's so because we're trying to model.
Doesn't he take more on average? Like, doesn't he go back?
But it's really hard to model and to say it's going to continue, if that makes sense. Like it's one thing to do that in the past, but it's another thing to like project that to continue. So I kind of give him the standard like 1.1 yard loss. But I have him for just under a 1 kneel down, which is it's still high. The league average is about 1.5 for team, but then you got to kind of play with the winning percentages and all that stuff. But anyway, point is, it really comes down to his scramble rate. And that's where it's a guess for me, because so for the season, his scramble rate is 6.4%, which is above the league average. The league average is about, I think about 4.5, 5. But what I did was I actually cut that projection in half. So I'm down to 3.2% scramble rate. Now, that does, I still have them dropping back a fair amount. I don't have them being super run heavy or anything, but I did look at that game against Oakland that you mentioned in 2019, and he dropped back 46 times in that game the week after the high.
He didn't run at all, I don't think.
0 scrambles.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that, and on the year, for context, the next, from that point on, he had about just under 600 dropbacks. He scrambled 39 times, for the rest of the year. So like 0 scrambles on 46 dropbacks is pretty significant. But
the devil's advocate would be it wasn't an AFC championship game, right? Like,
and that's why I still have it. I'm not projecting 0. I'm projecting half, which is kind of how you would, if you take like a sample size of 46. And like I said, I usually add about, 64 dropbacks of league average scramble rate. When you do all that math, it's not sexy to talk about. But point is, I have him around 8 yards, but it's a complete guess.
Yeah, I think it's a clear stayway, but it's an interesting prop that I bet a lot of people will talk about. And then my Mahomes over passing yards is my guess that he's going to be healthy. And then, but I think that there's a chance that he gets there even if he's not healthy. And like they're throwing, and then it's a detriment. And they're coming from behind, and he's staying in there. And then he could also rack up a ton of garbage passing yards if they're from behind. So it's kind of like a little bit of a hedge. If I had to guess before I get into my final pick, and this is a complete guess because with the news and what we're going to see, I do think that more sharp money is going to come in on the over and the Chiefs. And I don't know if it'll get to 3, but if you like the Bengals, I would wait. And if you like the under, I would wait. If you like the Chiefs, and you're right around a pick +1, I think I would take that. I think that there's only going to be more positive news on the Chiefs, which is going to help the over. And then there's going to be only more sharp money on the Chiefs and over on the assumption that Mahomes is okay. I mean, I already saw he looked fine walking out of the press conference. So I don't know how much you could take from that, but that's just my gut feel. Now, again, complete guess. But my third pick and final pick of the conference championship Sunday 6-pack, I'm going to go with, I think one that you might agree with. I'm going to go with Samaje Perine over 14.5 receiving yards. So we're going back to a get this quick because it means it's going to end at 15. We're going to go against the Chiefs.
It's actually already at 15.5, but I'll let you get to 14. Just say
Samaje Perine. Yeah, it's probably going to end at 16, I guess. But here's my thinking on it. So this goes back to the fact that I think I lean the over, and I think that I lean the Chiefs. I think the Bengals will be maybe playing from behind. I think it's going to be a really competitive, close, high-scoring game, similar to what we've seen in the past. And I also think that the Bengals' offensive line issues are now not being talked about enough because of what happened in Buffalo. But not enough people realize that you cannot generate pass rush in those conditions. It is a nightmare. I tweet out the Tom Brady thing all the time. He just says, look, D lineman can't get a push. So I think that there's still issues there, which means, and you even saw this last week, which means that you want Perine in there more on a number of plays, on third downs, passing downs. And I heard Kerner talk about this. He's in there in the 2-minute drill where running backs can really rack up rushing yards and attempts, but he's the better pass blocker. And I think that the offensive line will be much more of an issue this week with, maybe it snows and there's ice. This week, trying to deal with Chris Jones and company. And I think that the Chiefs are going to know, hey, look, we're coming after this offensive line. So what does that lend itself to? I think, again, the Burrow scrambles, which was my first play, but I think Perine being in there more, and then also under pressure, what do? It's like you're scrambling or you're dumping it off to Perine, and then you're getting rid of the ball quicker. And he has, the higher route rate. He's getting targeted more when he's in the game. So I think that there's value on this number. And then you're going up against, a Chiefs defense has to worry about all these weapons, and they already struggle with defending running backs. They're, bottom 5 in the NFL. Unfortunately, we were throwing to every other running back besides, ETN, who didn't even play. He scored a touchdown in the fourth quarter, then sat the rest of the game. Very bizarre. Even he still got to 18, barely playing. Perine, look, last week he had 5 catches for 31 yards. I expect a similar output this week. He did have 6 catches on 7 targets for 49 yards against the Chiefs earlier this season, but pretty poor comparison because Mixon didn't play in that game. So if you go back to last year's AFC Championship game when Mixon did play, Perine had 3 grabs on 4 targets for 43 yards, had a big explosive play. So
did he miss a touchdown on the fourth one?
Yeah,
that fourth target, wasn't that supposed to be like a long 20-yard touchdown or something like that?
Yep. So yeah, I like Perine over 15 receiving yards. And then what's connected to that is Mixon under 3.5 receptions, obviously correlated here. But I just think that he's not going to be in for as many. I think he's actually going to be in for even fewer passing downs and third downs and 2-minute drill snaps than he's been, because this offensive line is going to be a bigger issue this week. And so, yeah, I think Mixon under 3.5 is the correlated play that I played with, obviously, Perine. So obviously if they're throwing the Mixon in a bunch of third downs, they're throwing them a bunch, he's going to go over, and Perine's probably not. Although he still could have, he still could go over, but there's obviously some correlation here. But third pick is Samaje Perine over, we'll call 15 receiving yards.
Yeah. So last postseason, Perine 38 routes, Mixon 24 routes. So 19-12 per game in favor of Perine in terms of the routes. And if you go by percentage, the average route participation rate for Perine over the last 2 games is 49%. So he's in on 49. He's running a route on 49% of the dropbacks. That doesn't count pass blocking, but he's running a route 49% of the pass blocking snaps of the pass snaps, and Mixon 31%. So there's a clear bias in favor of Perine on pass down snaps, and that was interesting to see that continue last week because they were in a positive game script. So you're in a positive game script, you're not necessarily throwing, a third down or in a hurry up or, that kind of situation as much. You'd think, okay, Mixon could get a few more snaps, but didn't really happen. So, and as you mentioned, they could have to stay in the block a little more. Last week, they were kind of around their season average, but the week before running backs blocked about 23% of the time. Last week, the running backs blocked only 15% of the time because, as you mentioned, it was tougher for the Bills to get that pass rush. Travion Williams also got a snap in the pass game. I don't know if that continues, but either way, it's Mixon seems to be the guy losing out here. His route participation was 49% against the Ravens 3 weeks ago, then 26% and then 36%. So really hasn't rebounded from the regular season once they get into the postseason where it matters more. So that's probably a sharp play. I wouldn't go too far beyond. I do have it at about 16, so I wouldn't go too far beyond 16 here because I think that opened to like 13.5 or something. It has been bet up, but I think that's the right play here. I have Mixon at 3 catches just because he's been getting targeted a ton when he's on the field, but he's only running a route 30% of the time, so it's tough to project a guy for 4 catches when you're only running around on 30% of the pass snaps.
Yep.
All right, that is going to wrap. Oh, and by the way, just in terms of the side for the Chiefs, Bengals, it's another one where it's just, we're kind of dealing within these key numbers of 3 on either side.
Yeah, I was going to take the Bengals if it got to 3.
Yeah.
The Chiefs if it got to 3, and I'd probably take the Bengals if it got to 3 with this uncertainty, and we're just sitting in the middle of them all.
My issue is that, it's kind of like, at least with the Niners Eagles game, it's like the uncertainty kind of leads you to a place where you say, okay, like we're uncertain about how these offenses are going to perform, but we should expect the defenses to play well either way. Whereas in this game, there's uncertainty as, how healthy Mahomes is going to play, which affects, obviously scoring and the side.
Yep.
And then on the other side, this Bengal team, you mentioned Anarumo. He's always figuring something out, some other kind of concocting some kind of elaborate ruse against these elite quarterbacks to where at this point, it's like, I know the options at his disposal in terms of flummoxing these quarterbacks. It's like, we could send real pressure. We could send simulated pressure. We could drop 8 into coverage. We could play more man. We could play more, like, there's all these different things that the Bengals can do. but the way they're kind of mixing it up into a unique game plan week in, week out, that that's above my pay grade. That is something that's what makes him special, is that he's continuing to do things that we can't predict and that the other team can't predict. And that's why it's working. And then on top of that, you could come out with a one game plan in the first half. It may not work at all. And he could still adjust and end up, dominating in the second half and the Bengals win or the total goes under. So there's just the uncertainty goes in both directions for me, which is why probably not going to have a play on the side. Like you said, if it gets to 3 either way, I think that would be a situation where I say, okay, it might be worth it here, but especially with where it's been landing these last 3 games. But it's just this Anarumo scheme plus this Mahomes health factor. It just kind of throws everything for a loop. I did bet.
Yeah, I doubt they're going to like what he did last year in the playoffs was in the AFC Championship game in the second half. He dropped 8 and just completely flummoxed Mahomes. That's not going to be the plan here. I can tell you that. He's not going to let Mahomes, if he's banged up, just sit with no one coming at him and making him think. So maybe he switches it up and does that sometimes. But I'm curious to see the looks that he's going to have early on to test Mahomes and force him into some potentially tough situations with his mobility potentially hampered.
I was thinking because he didn't really use the drop 8 in the last meeting this regular season. I think he only used about 6 snaps, but they were wildly efficient. The Bengals were on defense when they did use it. But I was actually thinking contrarian, they could go back to it because it's like, okay, you drop it we know what Mahomes wants to do, right? He wants to get the ball out quick, and kind of mitigate the need to scramble. And they probably want to get 5 out in the route. And so, obviously you could blitz and say, hey, try to get 5 out in the route with this blitz. But you could also drop 8 in the coverage and dare Mahomes to run. Like that would be an interesting kind of, because number one, it's like if the whole Chiefs game plan is built around the quick game, dropping 8, we've seen Mahomes make these boneheaded throws and boneheaded interceptions when, there's just guys in coverage that he's not really thinking about or expecting. But it's like, maybe you dare him to run early. And so that, at least that way, like, let's say you drop 8 for the entire first drive, maybe even the second drive. It's like, okay, Mahomes kind of sits back, doesn't run once on like 6 dropbacks. Now you say, okay, he's a little banged up. He's not going to really move around. Now you can start sending guys at him. But if you drop back and he's taking those he's like hobbling to little 5-yard gains, when you drop 8, then it's like, okay, now we kind of understand. So I actually think you might see some drop 8 early in the game. Now, I don't know exactly how that's going to react because, again, like we said, we don't know how healthy or unhealthy Mahomes is. But I do think that could be an option. But that's what makes him so good. We don't really know what he's going to do.
Yeah. Should be fascinating to watch. And maybe might bet something live. So keep an eye out on Action Network app. And like we said earlier, Chris will have an in-depth preview on the NFC Championship, and I will have one on the AFC Championship. So make sure you check those out on actionnetwork.com, the Action Network app.
And I'll just mention real quick before we close out, for this game, for the Chiefs-Bengals game, I did bet a couple props already. They're probably, by the time you listen to this, there's probably going to be no value left, but I'll just let people know just in case there is. I bet Hayden Hurst over 3.5 catches. He's caught at least 4 in 10 of his 15 games this season. So I would bet that up to minus 195. I got it at 150. So it's minus 172 on FanDuel as we record this. So still about 20 points of value compared to where I would cut off at minus 195 for Hurst. But yeah, he's caught at least 4 in 10 of 15 against the Chiefs. He got hurt, but he only ran 6 routes, but he was targeted 3 times on those 6 routes. So he was on his way to a monster volume game in that game. And this Chiefs defense, you already mentioned they're bad against backs, but the way the Bengals have been playing it, when Mixon's in there, he's a little more likely to pass block, I think, too. So I still think Hurst is a guy that's going to continue to see, his 4 or 5 catches each game. And he's had a pretty high catch rate. He's getting pretty high percentage targets. So like Hurst over receptions. And then I bet Pacheco under receptions. I would only bet that to about minus 200. I do have the fair odds quite a bit higher, but I know most people aren't, they're not betting with high enough limits to really, or with a big enough bankroll to see much value past minus 200. So that looks like it's already past that. It's about minus 223 now. But those are the two Bengals Chiefs props I bet so far.
Love it.
All right. That is going to wrap it for our 6-pack for the conference championship round on the Action Network podcast presented by FanDuel. To recap, Stuck has Samaje Perine over 14.5 receiving yards, Joe Burrow over 17.5 rushing yards, and Jalen Hurts under 49.5 rushing yards. Hurts was your first pick, right?
Yep.
Okay, so Hurts was the first pick. Then it was Burrow, then Perine was the third. For me, San Francisco 49er, Philadelphia Eagle under 46.5. Like it down to 46, but you might get a 47. So not necessarily in a huge rush to bet this. Quez Watkins under 16.5 receiving yards would bet it down to 13.5. And Brock Purdy under a half an interception plus 122 would bet that to plus 112. Now it is time for the conference championship coaches pep talk. All right, this week's coaches pep talk comes to us courtesy of the 1989 film Dead Poets Society, and we're dedicating it to the Chiefs and Patrick Mahomes here. I mean, they haven't really seized the day the last 3 times against the Cincinnati team, but I mean, Mahomes is supposed to be this legend. It's all right there in front of you. Just got to knock off this Bengal team, get back to the Super Bowl. So should we dedicate it to Mahomes and company?
Let's do it.
All right, that is going to wrap it up for our conference championship Action Network podcast presented by FanDuel. You can find Stucky on Twitter at Stucky2. You can find me on Twitter at Chris Raybon. You can find us at those same handles on the free award-winning Action Network app. Just a reminder again, Action offering a pro subscription, 40% off, only being offered during the NFL playoffs. So if you don't already have pro, it's the best time to subscribe and unlock all the best features of the Action app. Of course, you can find all of our content, including Stucky's AFC Championship preview, my NFC Championship preview at actionnetwork.com or in the Action Network app. So until next time, good luck and let's get this money.